Hi, I'm Rebecca, and that's Doug. Welcome to Killer Meals. Today, we are dining with Robert Lee Massie, and this is his last meal. Robert Lee Massie was convicted of the murder of two people and executed in the state of California in 2001 by lethal injection. But let's start at the beginning. Robert Lee Massie was born December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1941. His mother was 15 years old at the time of his birth, and his father only married her to avoid going to prison for statutory rape.
What were the laws? She can't consent to marriage because she's 15. It's gross.
During his childhood, his deadbeat of a father would repeatedly abuse him, going so far as to hold his head underwater. He bounced around abusive foster homes, and when he was 11 years old, he was sent to the Beaumont School in Virginia for truant and runaway boys, where he was abused further. State medical reports describe Massie as a very disturbed little boy who will need care outside of his home for a long period of time. At 17, Massie was convicted of auto theft and sent to prison, where he was sexually assaulted by 4 other inmates. Traumatized by the incident, Massie faked psychosis and was sent to a prison psychiatric facility. After his release, he began to self-medicate with alcohol and methamphetamines. On the evening of January 7th, 1965, armed with a rifle, Massie approached a man by the name of Franklin Bowler in West Covina, California, as he was getting out of his car. Massie hit Bowler in the mouth with the butt of the rifle and demanded he give Massie all of his money. The man handed over his wallet, and Massie shot him in the head and fled. Shockingly, Bowler lived, as the bullet only grazed him. Because he was having such a successful night robbing people and shooting them in the head, Massie decided to keep on rolling into San Gabriel to the home of Morris and Mildred Weiss. Just like earlier in the evening, as the couple were getting out of their car, Massie approached them with a rifle. He fatally shot Mildred, got into a nearby getaway car, and escaped. Just after midnight that same night, Massie entered a Baldwin Park bar and pulled out his rifle and said, "This is a stick-up," because he's a Looney Tune.
Nobody's ever actually said that in real life. This is a stick-up. Get out of here. You're like Elmer Fudd.
He took money from the cash register and the wallets of the bartender and a patron.
The bartender threw a bottle at him. As a former bartender, I want so badly to be like, yeah, I would have done that. I wouldn't have.
8 days later, on January 15th, Massie was hanging out in MacArthur Park in Los Angeles, where he met a man named Frank Patty. Shortly after meeting, the two men headed to Patty's hotel room, where Massie pulled out a revolver, ordered Patty to strip naked, and tried to rob him. Patty refused, and Massie shot him twice in the stomach and once in the neck before fleeing the scene. Patty lived because Massie is a terrible shot, and 5 days later, Massie was apprehended for the assault. During his interrogation, he admitted not only to the assault on Frank Patty, but also to the botched robbery and fatal shooting of Mildred Weiss. For this, he was convicted of 1 count of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and 4 counts of theft, and was sentenced to death.
Look, we're only a few minutes into this video. You know this isn't the end. So what happened?
Governor and future President Ronald Reagan himself stayed Massie's execution in 1967 a mere 16 hours before he was to be put to death, so he could testify at the trial of his alleged accomplice. Okay, so he didn't get executed in 1967, and at the beginning, I said he wasn't executed until 2001, so he stayed in prison that whole time, right?
Right?
No. See, in 1972, the Supreme Court decided that the death penalty was unconstitutional. In a landmark case called Furman v. Georgia, the Supreme Court ruled that the death penalty violates the 8th and 14th Amendments and constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. Subsequently, the Supreme Court of the United States invalidated all death penalty sentences. Massie's sentence was commuted to life in prison, and in 1978, he was paroled for being a model prisoner. He only spent a total of about 13 years in prison.
I just want a t-shirt that says model prisoner, because everybody's a model prisoner. You're so good at doing prison.
Less than 1 year later, on January 3rd, 1979, Massie attempted to rob 61-year-old Boris G. Namoff in his San Francisco liquor store. A customer, oblivious to the ongoing robbery, stood next to Massie in line and watched Namoff hand over money before saying, "A guy can't make a living anymore."
It sounds like something my dad would do.
The liquor store customer then watched another employee, Charles Harris, come talk to Namoff as Massie prepared to leave with the money in his pocket. Namoff then chased after Massie. They wrestled, and Massie eventually shot Namoff in the neck, killing him and wounding Charles Harris with another shot. The witness was able to duck behind the counter and call the police while Massie fled on foot with a grand total of $30 in his pocket. At 9:50 p.m. the very next night, the San Francisco Police Department apprehended Massie while he was driving his car. While searching Massie, they found a Ruger 357 Magnum, fully loaded. In his coat, they found a loaded .380 Mauser automatic weapon with its hammer cocked in a fireable position and several boxes of ammunition. He was taken to the San Francisco Hall of Justice, where he admitted to killing Namoff during their struggle, but claimed he was drunk and under the influence of cocaine at the time. Massie was charged with first-degree murder for the death of Boris G. Namoff. Despite his lawyer advising against it,
It comes back.
Massie confessed and pled guilty, and on May 25, 1979, he was sentenced to death again.
Wow.
He was on death row from 1979 to 2001. That's such a long time.
He wasn't.
In 1985, his case was automatically appealed to the Supreme Court of California, and they overturned the conviction and death sentence. The court ruled that Massie could not plead guilty against the advice of his lawyer and ordered a retrial. In 1989, Massie was retried, reconvicted, and resentenced to death for a third and final time. He was a staunch critic of the automatic appeals process and argued that this retrial, occurring against his will, should result in his freedom, as trying a defendant twice for the same crime is double jeopardy. Thankfully, the courts did not agree. In October of 2000, Massie dropped all ongoing appeals in federal court and requested to be put to death. In a phone interview, he said, "I'm tired. I just don't want to live the rest of my life in jail." Death penalty opponents did try to stop his execution against the wishes of Massie, but they were unsuccessful. At the time, Massie was California's longest-serving death row inmate. In a letter published by the San Francisco Chronicle, Massie wrote, "Soon I will be dead. Early on the morning of March 27th, the state of California will flood my veins with a lethal cocktail of sodium pentothal, pancuronium bromide, and potassium chloride. Death will follow swiftly. I could live for several more years." On March 27th, 2001, at 12:20 a.m., after living nearly 30 years total on death row, Massie was executed in San Quentin State Prison by lethal injection. About a dozen friends and relatives of Massie's victims gathered for dinner at a Marin County restaurant, some meeting each other for the first time that night. During the execution, many of them held hands and watched intently as the guards went about their work. One man bowed his head, looked up after Massie died, and smiled. "I'm glad this is done," said Nick Rickman, Namoff's grandson. "It ruined our family. It ripped us apart." Namoff's son Rick said, "This execution marks an end to a sad and tragic chapter. This execution corrects a wrong." Witnesses described Massie as awake, alert, and cooperative as he entered the execution chamber shortly after midnight. Warden Janine Woodford asked Massie one last time if he wanted to abandon his appeals and proceed with the execution. Massie said yes and nodded his head. His last words were, "Forgiveness, giving up all hope for a better past." 5 guards placed him on a gurney and strapped his arms. Massie helped them find a good vein to use and even pumped his fist to help engorge it. The first drug administered rendered him unconscious, and the second stopped his heart and lungs. Massie's body jerked 4 times, his back arching and his feet twitching as the drugs did their job. He stopped breathing at 12:25 a.m. After a lifetime of cheating his own death, Robert Lee Massie was pronounced dead at 12:33 a.m. He asked for 2 vanilla milkshakes, extra crispy French fries, extra crispy fried oysters, and soft drinks as his last meal.
Order up for Robert Lee Massie.
Yeah.
Okay, what I did for the extra crispy fries, I went with a pub style 3 cook chip. It's the crispiest way that I can think to make a fry.
It's pretty crispy.
It was pretty crispy.
Pretty crispy.
And for the oysters, I used cornstarch, flour, and cornmeal. That was pretty much the crispiest way that I could think to make an oyster. Cheers.
Oh my god. It's really good. God. So perfect.
Thank
It's a
you.
really good oyster.
Next up, for the sodas, I went with a cola style soda. I just kept it pretty basic.
No, it's crisp and it's fresh and it's warm. We bottled that up for you. What's this?
And last up is the milkshake.
Alright.
So we just made a vanilla bean ice cream. I went a little bit heavy on the egg. I think it's going to give it kind of an eggnog vibe.
Oh my god. I don't want to say creamy because that's stupid, but it's so like decadent. Really good.
Cheers. I think we knocked it out of the park. All right, well, thanks for watching. Give us a like and a subscribe. We'll see you next week for your reservation on Killer Meals.